Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is another paper test here, a first of its kind with the Mohawk white coated silk 100-pound cover. I bought a ream of it recently at Kelly Paper, my local paper retailer, and it is a somewhere in between matte and glossy cardstock. Okay, it is coated cardstock, but it's somewhere, I would say, between 0 and 50%. It's somewhere in between there in terms of the surface, quality, sheen to it, okay? They call this silk, but it's kind of a satin finish card. Here it is right here. Actually, I think this is single-sided. Actually, it might be double-sided, but you see that little bit of sheen to it right there? All right, but this is it with the dye-based inks. Pigment inks applied over the top of it, and it works fantastic. I think I have a feeling. I just did this. I have a feeling it's going to dry in a similar, look to how it looks when it's wet. Sometimes when you use certain types of combinations of media and surface, sometimes when they dry, it looks quite different than how it looks when it's still moist. Okay, I don't know for sure. We'll have to see. But it took all the inks just fine, and if you're familiar with layered dye-based ink applications, if you do it on this paper, and I'm going to use this paper a lot, I think, and I knew it when I picked it up because I really love the feel of it, but it's more absorbent than glossy cardstock, okay? It's absorbing my ink faster, much, much faster. So for me, I'm going to put much stronger base coat in than I even did in this video, okay? Just so I can establish more of kind of a wetter surface to apply my darker colors in, okay? When I started moving into the darker tones, my base coat was really kind of drying up, and it was kind of a clunkier type of application process. So I've been using a lot of my paper towels, and I did a lot of the color applications with this paper towel right here. Okay, but then what I did just to make things easier for myself is I switched to my kitchen sponge, a little bit of a super old kitchen sponge, and I wet it down with some, just some tap water, and then I dipped it into my inks and applied it this way. So if you see this video, you'll see where that happens, and this worked fantastic for that in terms of getting kind of larger applications and larger fields and, swatches of colored laid down in this case. So I just go with something very basic here in the range of blue values. I also used a Distress Ink Tumbled Glass for my base layer because it's really nice and light of a value of blue. And I don't know, a lot of people have the Distress Inks and so on and so forth, so I don't know, just use a little bit more ink, okay? That's the bottom line than, say, glossy cardstock. And it makes sense because, a paper that's not quite so coated is going to be more absorbent. So, anyways, and I really like the look. And one of the things I mentioned in this video is because of that dull satin finish, see, it's not so glossy, but look at the impressions on here, Now they're going to dry and look a little bit different than this. These are still wet, okay? And the reason why those foreground impressions are so glossy is that, Versafine ink is an oil-based ink, so really quite reflective. But I do like the contrast. They'll still have a little bit of sheen to them, but I do like the contrast between this, your impressions and whatnot, and this kind of duller, satiny type of sheen in the background. Doesn't it give it a little bit more kind of depth? It's subtle in some ways. I mean, in glossy paper you still get that depth too, but this one, it comes about from a textural standpoint as well as a value standpoint. You stamp lighter things in the distance, it creates that depth, but this one's a textural difference too, with kind of that satin finish, to the paper, what we're starting off with, and these eventual Versafine images in the foreground like that. And the dye-based inks too. See, these dye-based inks here too have a little bit of sheen to them. These are dye-based ink impressions right here. I used just a black dye. And those have a little bit of sheen to them, so those ones create a little bit more depth between image and surface as well. So kind of an interesting, I don't know, what a revelation or something like that, you know, using this type of paper right here. So anyways, my first test with the Mohawk, and I really like it. Hope you enjoy the video if you choose to watch it. Thanks for tuning in, as always. Okay, let's do a new experiment here. It's with the white coated silk 100-pound cover, 8.5 by 11. I'm going to use a half sheet. And this is a type of paper, coated paper, with more of that kind of dull finish. Another word for it is called silk. You might call it like a satin finish. It's neither matte nor glossy, okay? It's somewhere in between. I have another brand of paper called, it's the Appleton Paper Utopia. It's no longer being sold. That's slightly kind of a little bit more towards the glossy side. I would say this one right here is, it's somewhere between matte and I don't know, kind of, if this is matte and this is glossy, it's somewhere kind of towards the middle, but a little bit more towards the matte. That's the impression I get from kind of feeling it here, all right? But coated paper, and I think that, you know, having a little bit more than matte is, you know, something that could potentially benefit us. But if you're going with the matte, you know, coated paper, I think it'll yield, you know, pretty similar results. I just got this one. I tend to really like the feel of it here. You can see there's a little bit of sheen to it, you know, if I hold it up in the light there. You know, a matte might be a little bit more dull looking. All right, so that being said, as I've mentioned in a lot of these previous, you know, recent videos of mine, I'm going with a blue tone color scheme. It's a color scheme that I know like the back of my hand. Let's just incorporate a few other colors in here, just, you know, to make things a little bit more interesting and maybe relatable. A lot of you don't have Marvy inks, but you have a lot of things like Distress inks or Memento and whatnot. And just a paper towel here, okay? Now, this is not the only way to work. I'm going to be working in kind of a silhouette style of stamp impression applications, okay? You can stamp everything out, you know, to begin with, and just ink over the top of it like you're coloring a scene. This one here, I'm just doing the background first, so we're going to get this swatched kind of varied background using, you know, various ranges, a range of blue tones, and then we're just going to stamp right over the top of it, okay? It's a really easy and fast way to work, okay? If you have really specific areas that you want to, you know, adjust your lighting and shading and whatnot, then it's better to stamp everything first so that you know where everything goes. But I'm going to be working with a lot of imagery that's, for the most part, kind of silhouette-based. And that's where you can just do the entire background first. It really doesn't matter too much, you know, in terms of what this background looks like. I mean, I can control things a little bit more if I stamp my composition first, but this is just kind of a fun way to work, too. All right, so I'm going to have a little bit of I think a lighting scheme in here. All right, so I don't know who I'll stamp this, you know, really specifically, but, you know, it's not going to matter too much, okay? What I want to go for somewhat is a range of values, okay? All right, so this is just kind of going in and testing things out in a quick fashion, okay? Now, when I feel like this, if you've seen my other videos and you've seen me use things like glossy cardstock, stock that is less than glossy, just, you know, it makes sense. It's going to be a little bit more absorbent because glossy cardstock, there's just more of a coating over the top of that clay coating, okay? So this one's probably just a really light shade of something over the top of this card. You know, like I said, it's almost matte, but there's a slight, ever so slight kind of sheen to it. I would say it's not even satin, it's probably less than that. Now, this is the first time I've ever used this cardstock, but I just know that from using matte cardstock, this should be just fine. And you know, the differences in glossy cardstock can be, you know, pretty substantial, but I haven't found too drastic of a change between less than glossy cardstocks, okay? There's going to be a big change if you use something like a photo paper, though. It's a, you know, because it's a completely different coating on here. This one's this clay coating, and photo paper is an emulsion, okay? It's a different thing. So if you're familiar with cardstocks and coated cardstocks, you know, this is what we're looking at right here. Okay, so let's just go in and test this out. I got a pretty good slathering going with that tumbled glass, by the way. That was the color that I just used, okay? I'm going for, you know, slightly more of a kind of a, I don't know, expressionistic type of background here with this swirling type of, I don't know, what would it be, like a lighting, I don't know, like a vortex or something. Okay, now, see this second color that I've applied over the top of that previous color? I find it blending a little bit easier because we've used so much of this distressed ink tumbled tile, and I used the re-inker because it gave me a lot of coverage really fast. But this one right here, I just dabbed in like this, and it moves a little bit easier because the paper and the surface of the paper is becoming wet, or, you know, kind of damp. So these inks apply a little bit faster. Now, it's really hot, and I don't know if it's really dry. It's kind of more humid, but it is. I'm standing here in a fairly hot room. It was like 91 outside or something like that, and I don't have the air conditioning going or anything like that. So this is setting up, but still, you know, I can feel the difference between the first color and the next color. All right, now what I'm doing is I'm working through a range of values of a given hue. Okay, I'm going to dip into this one. This one's a little bit more of a blue-greenish, because I like to give a little bit of a warm tinge to it. This is Caribbean blue, and I think that's a fantastic color. I really like using it because it introduces a little bit more temperature variation into an otherwise cool color scheme. You don't have to, but mix and match your pads. You know, I use my Distress ink here, and I'm using the Marvy inks right here. You can use whatever you have, Stampin' Up, Memento, you know, your Distress inks, whatever. These are dye-based inks. Now, I'm not going to oscillate between like a dye-based ink and, let's say, a alcohol ink or something like that. Maybe you do, you know, but it will be quite a different process than this one right here, okay? You know, when you're mixing types of inks, you wouldn't mix like a pigment ink into this. You can try it, but just keep in mind it'll yield different results, and it'll have a, you know, really different kind of application feel to it, okay? Now, I'm just using the same part of this paper towel, my applicator in this case, okay? Now, see this right here? I'm just kind of starting it from the outside edge. When I start to get a little bit darker, I'm a little bit more perimeter oriented. Now this silk paper, again, it is feeling quite different than, see this right here, when I put my finger in there, I'm kind of removing some ink, so it's telling you that the ink is starting to really build up on the surface, okay? But it still feels quite dry, so it's, if you've watched these videos and you bought yourself some glossy cardstock, by the time you get around to your darker tones like this, I really feel it kind of building up. And sometimes, if you've laid down enough of your first inks, it will be quite wet on the surface. Now my paper towel's starting to fray, but you know, you can still keep using it if you want. I mean, you can switch around. You can use, you know, a clean area. Just wad it up and, you know, keep going. But, so this is really feeling quite dry, so, you know, just keep applying it. You can use kind of texture, you know, for an advantage like that. A lot of people just, I don't know, for some reason it was like, Someone's probably said somewhere along the line in stamping, oh my gosh, I got some textures showing, or streaks, you know what I mean? But I don't know where that became kind of this aesthetic type of notion, that you don't want to show anything. It's not like, throughout history, people are painters. It's like, oh my gosh, you can see the brush stroke, that's exactly what you want, when you're a painter. You want to show kind of the hand of, you don't want to, someone to look at someone that looked like a painting and someone says, oh my gosh, that looks so great. It looks like you did it on a computer, It's like, so why would you want that in stamping? I can see it in some instances, but, I don't know, texture, when did texture become like this bad thing, what do you want it to look like, some kind of robotized kind of notion? There's more kind of expression and feeling when you have kind of a little bit more influence, a visual record of something done, with the human hand. That's where you can kind of give, this feeling of kind of emotion in a piece. But you can see that I'm just kind of kinking this up right here in some areas. It's because it's really grabbing this, okay? So the surface is really drying fast on me, okay? One of the things I've played around with before too is a kitchen sponge. Let's play around with that too. All right. Now this is a very used kitchen sponge here. This one's a little bit. Let's see. Okay, finally. Let's get a little water in this one. Like I said, this is the first time I've used this ink right here. I've used some of this blue on this kitchen sponge. The kitchen sponge is, of course, going to be an absorbent applicator. Oh, yeah, that works fantastic there. So it will apply more liquid, the form of ink, to my piece right here. So paper towel worked okay. Kitchen sponge working even better, I think. And see this right here, I want to kind of create this range of values here, starting from light in my light source to darker out here, okay? I decided to go with this blue color scheme, well, because I know it really well. I'm testing out this paper, but it's also like super hot out today, so it's one thing about stamping. You don't necessarily always have to, some people, you stamp, you create these kind of worlds where you would like to be right now or whatever. It's like if I do something tropical, it doesn't mean I'm there, but it's like a little tropical retreat, over the course of, a half an hour or however long it takes you to stamp something out. Okay, but look at that. Paper towel worked really nice. Doesn't that look kind of like a tunnel of light or something like that? These pieces like this are really fun to do. A lot of times I'm just doing these striations across like that, like a horizon kind of thing, and maybe down here in the water, but you can just go in any kind of shape. You can do an S-curve or something like that and maybe it look more like an aurora borealis, northern light type of thing. And that's really kind of fun to do. What you just want to do is you just want to create your kind of transitions, here and there. If I just went with all just solid, this color blue right here, and it was just this little opening, it might look okay, but I think it'd be missing a lot of variation that you can achieve from the use of your different inks, okay? By using different colors of them and different amounts of them. Okay, let's see here. This is a Prussian blue. This is a really fun blue to use just because it is so dark, okay? So it's like you want to go a little bit darker with blue. Where do you go to? Prussian blue. Okay. My sponge here this is a really used sponge. I was about to toss it out, but just wanted to use it in a scene just to make a point about, how you can utilize. There's a lot of things around us that we can utilize. I think like I keep saying this, but I need to see if I have some rags of like an old t-shirt or something like that. I think an old t-shirt would be the ultimate applicator, you know, just in terms of that softness of it and whatnot. But kitchen sponge, and one that I was about to toss out, you know. What we never want to do, well, I guess we could, but ideally, you know, we want people to be able to, you know, have access to materials wherever you are in the world, you know. It's a lot easier to get things in the U.S., you know, just in terms of the availability, but sometimes you can't get things like, you know, color box stylus tools, you know, when they're around. I don't know, different types of, you know, kind of boutique applicators and whatnot, but things like this, you know, sponge of all types of sorts, easily found, right, wherever you are. You know, you just go into your kitchen. Like a chamois might be really good. All right, I'd say that Prussian Blue is just what this scene needed, don't you think? Let's go a little bit more right here. This part right here is getting really close to my light source, so I'll just put a little bit right there. I don't want to go all the way down like that, you know. The paper still feels really good. This is a 100-pound weight. Okay, so it's not real buckling on me. I think I don't know, if I put this much on my glossy cardstock, I think it might start curling a little bit. I mean, you just counter curl it, but this one feels really good, so so far so good with that. Let's go with black. Okay. Where to use black? You're going to go a little bit more. Oh, that's really dark right there. Try to blend it in like this. So see, I'm staying with it like this and going in like this. Okay, so I get those lighter shades of black. And then see what I'm doing is I'm using the drier version of this, so I'm getting more of this. This is like a light gray right here, right? So you don't always just ink it up and go, ink it up and go, and then you get this solid, huge, you know, black area right there. You get this more transitioning one when you utilize the drier version of it on whatever application material you're using. See this right here? So it goes from, you know, pretty solid black to more of the grays like that, but where you're overlapping those darker blues, it doesn't necessarily look as gray. It looks like a darker blue, doesn't it? Okay. Looks okay. All right, let's play around with our impressions. Impression quality is going to be really key in kind of determining somewhat the nature of this paper. All right, let's play around with something. This is something that I like to do with this cloud cumulus stamp a lot. Okay, I like to vary my value, my impression value with this stamp right here. All right, so this is light, medium, dark out here, right? Well, what do we have here? See, this is where it's good. It's always good to kind of pull your pads out, and then you can see, you know, these different values here. Here, example, light, medium, and dark. Okay, now this dark, medium, you know, lighter area in here is kind of this color, or it's even darker than this one. So what you do is you leave that one out of there. Okay, if you had a little white in here, then you can use that lighter blue. They're all going to be a little bit different, so you have to kind of just take a look and see how your scene is looking. Yours might look really dark in here and then be light, where this is called light blue from Marvy. That might not even show up, so you might have to go with a darker version. But you could try the cloud in a lighter version, and if it doesn't show up, then you just use a darker one and just stamp right over it. It's not like, oh my god, I made a mistake, I can't see it, I can't stamp it again, right? Okay, now, sky figures, I just wiped around the edge quite a bit, okay, so that when I stamp this out, it will fade out on the surrounding area, okay? And I'm going to stamp this out several times. This is where the light is coming from. It's coming from above. So whatever direction you're stamping this in relation to that light source, you're going to adjust the angle accordingly, okay? Now this is a lighter area blue in here. Let's see if this even shows up here, okay? And this paper is quite damp now, so I'm stamping kind of damp, wet ink into a damp surface right here. It's not sopping wet or anything like that, but look at that now. See how that just blends right in there? So I know that this is dark enough to show up in there, okay? All right, so you just ink this up each time. Now watch how easy this is, okay? Take a dry paper towel and wipe off the edge. I don't know, it's like a, half inch, quarter inch in there. Maybe I even went in like an inch, okay? So don't be gingerly with it. Wipe it off really good like that, okay? And then, we're stamping it again like this. Now, if I stamp this right here, now look where it is. It's kind of under that cloud, so you just turn that around that way. If you're using an unmounted stamp, piece of rubber, just, take a look at it. You can see, those billows and which way they're kind of facing, okay? See that right there? Look how soft that is. I mean, I could stamp out that cloud in all, let's say, black. It would look, more ominous that way because the contrast would be much more extreme. I could stamp it in black right over the top of this, that's what I'm saying. So you can change the spirit of it, but if you want to go with kind of these value schemes that you've established throughout this kind of range, then why not vary it? And you have all these pads out right there. And I'll show you, we're not going to stamp this out, all of these clouds out in this one value of blue, because when it gets darker out here, we're going to have to go darker, but you have your range right here. So just utilize it. So it's really utilizing your color scheme really strategically, and it's just such an easy kind of concept here to kind of follow along. You have your range of colors laid out for you. You can color with it that way, but you can also stamp your imagery that way accordingly. And it doesn't have to be kind of theoretical, it's more kind of visual for you. Okay? Now see, I'm stamping these other ones down here, but if I couldn't see those, then you just ink it up with a darker color and just stamp it right over the top of it. Okay? Look at that, isn't that fun? I love that look, the varying values like that. Okay, and see every impression, and just kind of aim it in that direction. No, I mean, I don't have to wipe it off by the time you start moving it on the outside like that, but I usually do. Okay. Okay, but let's see. See that right there? Now that one might, when it dries, it might just completely disappear, so I might need to go with a little bit of a darker one, but look at that. This is what everyone always says. They say, oh, you make it look so easy, okay? And yeah, it's because I use easy techniques. I don't change things around to make it a complicated technique. So if you use kind of easy kind of methodology, it'll be easy. So something that would be harder, let's say if I stamp this out and I don't kind of wipe off the edges, so I'm going to have much harsher edges, right? And that's, if I have a harsh edge to harsh edge, it could be potentially a little bit harder to blend in. So if you just wipe this off first, and you just don't have those harsh edges to begin with, look at that. You can't see the edges of that cloud at all. You can barely see it there. I might have to go darker. Let's go with the Prussian Blue so you can see it a little bit more. Now see, that's an example. It's getting too dark out here, so I need to go really with Prussian Blue or black. Okay? So you see if something shows up, and if it doesn't, if it's not strong enough, then just go with a darker one. I mean, we don't have to keep going clouds all the way around the perimeter. But there's that Prussian Blue, there's the other blue. So this one's a little bit darker. Okay, so just try to keep things nice and easy. Don't try to rush things, you know. I didn't achieve this blue background with the first color that I used, okay? I just kept working it, okay? And it will develop. See that cloud right there? Let's just keep going right here. Let me kind of expedite the process like this a little bit. See how I always have that cloud aimed towards my light source? Okay. Remember when you go over the light source to flip this around and have it underlit. Okay? And that's how you get that type of thing. I mean, that'd be a nice scene, you know, unto itself. You can stamp or like emboss some kind of a word in here. I mean, wouldn't this be a kind of a really pleasant, really tranquil, like sympathy card or something like that, you know? Okay, let's see now. Let's go with some additional imagery. All right, now this is going to tell me something. I don't think I'm going to have a problem here with my images, because I think, see, the cloud stamped out fine in dye-based ink in these values right here. You know, a medium blue and lighter blue, darker blue to a real dark blue. So let's just test and see how this is going to look in black ink. I think okay, you know, just based on my other impressions. This one's real solid, so it should stamp out fine. I was fairly confident with this paper to begin with, and it's proven to be, you know, to be so. I mean, I didn't think it would be so much different from, you know, the Appleton Utopia. Let's go right about right here. I can go higher, you can go lower. I think about right in here. I like to have my my trees kind of go in front of my light source, like if there was a moon here or something like that. I mean, it look okay up here too, but if you have those trees in front of a moon, they complement each other by having something really dark and solid next to that light source. It makes the light source seem lighter, and it makes the object in front of it seem darker because of the contrast that you're providing. All right, now, like I said, this right here is, in the paper is fairly damp, so I'm going to hold this down a little bit longer for that ink to transfer. I have to do that a lot on the glossy because it's real sealed in. With this paper right here, being that it's more absorbent, maybe I don't need to hold it down as much, but let's just take a look right here. Yeah, look at that right there. It's totally floating right now, but you know, we'll get some additional imagery stamped in here. I don't think I need to hold this down as long as I did. Let's just go like this. Stamp it like this. Overlapping, probably 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. Okay, there's plenty of leeway, okay? That's where you don't get those kind of seams showing up in between things. That's why you don't need super careful stamp placement either, okay? It's because you don't need to know. I mean, if you have an unmounted version of it, yeah, it's harder to see, but just overlap it enough. And we're talking about like this far to this far. You know what I mean? If you stamp it out here, then you're going to have this big space in between. So just overlap it enough. I mean, there's plenty of leeway in there. You know, I mean, if I overlap it by 4 inches, that's going to be too much, you know. But, you know, between here and here, you know, I mean, it can go like this, and you can overlap it by that, okay? And it's not going to look weird. It's just, you know, that's the way these stamps are designed. I could stamp this one. I stamped this one a little bit lower, so that it looks like this part's a little bit closer to you. You can stamp it up higher. If I stamp it up higher, it looks like that part of the cove goes back farther. So, you see what I mean? You don't have to get too, you know, careful with different things about placement. It just would look like it's a different area of the piece. Okay, this is the Pine Rose stamp. This is the Prussian Blue, right? Okay. Watch this right here. You know how we kind of blotted off those clouds? Let's do the same thing here, okay? All right. And I'm blotting it off like halfway up, okay? Taking a good amount of it on the lower part, okay? Now, why is that? This is wet to dry like that. Just like with the cloud, right? It was going from wet to dry. So it's more of a solid image right in here, and it's a drier image out here, okay? So it's going from, you know, darker to lighter here. On the cloud, it was darker to lighter out there. Now, why is that? Because I'm going to blend this in with this tree here, okay? This is an easy technique, you know, just wiping off ink off of here. And then when I stamp it like this, you see those trees in the background now? But see how it goes from a little bit darker to a little bit lighter down here, where it goes into these trees, okay? I'll do the same thing right here. I could just, you know, ink it up in blue and just stamp it out, but we won't be able to see the silhouette of these trees as much as we will if I take off most of the ink off the bottom, right? Okay, so here's what it looks like. You take off more off the bottom, okay, like a, you know, good amount. And then as you transition up, you take off a little bit less. I have a little bit less pressure as I move up there like that, okay? Okay, then you stamp it like this. Don't need to really, do, you know what I mean? I don't want to stamp it down here, but I mean, you know, you can see pretty well enough where you're stamping it out, okay? See that right there? See where it goes from darker? It's subtle. You know, I probably should have taken off even more. I'm starting off with such a dark blue like that, but doesn't that look like some, you know, there's nice depth to those trees. Okay, so let me see, my thoughts, you know, going back to the paper specifically, I'm really liking this paper. Now, silk, you know, and a finish like a doll, you know, that's not, it's easier to find a matte paper than it is to find a dull. I think it's easier to find glossy than it is dull, but there are some types of papers out there that are just easier to find than others, okay? Now you can go with a matte too, but remember it's just going to be slightly more absorbent in feel, okay, when you're stamping it out. Again, I'm putting some of these reflections down in my water as well. See how that looks? Does that look kind of fun? And what is it? You know, we're just altering our technique a little bit, but it's, well, or altering the usage of these types of images. So see, this is where it goes too. This is, okay, this is the light, medium, dark, this is light, medium, dark, okay? You're using this light, medium, dark type of concept for your images too. So it's light in here, so you stamp lighter clouds, medium clouds, darker clouds out here. But what this also represents from a visual depth standpoint, okay, is this is far, right? So when you're going back into the light area, in theory, those clouds are much farther away, right? So let's see what this is. The darker, okay, this is done in black right here. This is my range. This is closer to us, and this is far. So I've stamped out my Lakeside Cove in black, and then I've stamped out my Pine Row in this one because it's farther away, okay? You'll get used to it, you know. If you think in terms of kind of depth and not think so much in terms of like two-dimensional, we're stamping everything two-dimensionally, but kind of we're thinking a little bit more three-dimensional, but the process by which to achieve it is nothing more than just using your values like that, okay? So instead of just stamping something in black, stamp it in black, and then put some background things in a lighter version of your color scheme. Okay, so let's see if we can get a little toning. Now this is where I really like my stylus tools. If you've watched my videos before, the sponge type of applicators really are a little bit better, but okay, so I'm going to make kind of a more of a narrower applicator like this. See how it's kind of, it's like the, you know, the width of my finger like that. Okay, so let's take that and then let's use, let's go with the Prussian Blue, okay? Okay, let's see. Okay, see where there's these shadows down here, and it's darker around the edge, like that? I like to take my additional color and toning. Okay, now it's easy for me to flip this upside down because I can get right here easier. If I just, if I'm working that way, I can't see it as much, but just hitting your areas down here with a little bit of an extra tone here. Let me just use this like this. And see, I'm just going along this waterline here. Okay, it's very subtle. Okay, because in some areas I'm putting this dark blue over the top of some dark areas, dark anyway. Let me see if you can kind of see the difference right here. Okay, a few taps like that. Now, do you see this right over here? How it's a little bit darker. See how this is sitting on top? I think I need to use some black so you can see it a little bit more distinctly, but I'm starting it off with blue here just so I can build up some tones instead of jumping straight into black shadows, okay? Okay, now that is my Prussian Blue. Let's go to black so you can see it a little bit easier. Okay, I have black on here. I'm just using the same applicator here. Oh, I just re-inked my black pad. I forgot. There's a ton of black on here. Okay, let me see if I can kind of transition this a little bit. It got really too dark right there. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me just keep using the black that's on there. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, I'm kind of putting it right down at the base of these rocks. Okay. Okay, I did something horrible here. That's like way too much. That's really anchored in there. But you see that right there? So I feel like when you tone your imagery in like this a little bit more like this. Okay, this is perfect with this amount of ink on here. It looks like this. See, it's just barely any tone being applied. It's much more of a gray. Okay, let me try to even this out a little bit. It gives the rocks and the objects in the scene more visual weight and opacity. When you add shadows like that, you're saying that, they're just not, these objects in here aren't see-through, okay? They have weight and opacity, where that, the colors in the background aren't just showing through it like a, like a stained glass window or something like that. Okay, so anyways, see, I put some of that tone over the tops of those rocks. So they're sitting in the scene a little bit more. Okay, foreground. All right, now, I feel that dye-based ink gave me a pretty good impression. I'm trying to determine if I should use some Versafine for my foreground. That is a really dark black ink. Okay, I wasn't going to do it, but then as I started just saying that right now, I'm thinking... I started thinking about this scene more than the testing aspect of it. So one of the things I could tell if I stamp this Versafine oil-based black pigment ink over the top of it, I know how long this takes for it to dry on glossy cardstock, but I have a feeling on this silk cardstock, and just how much more absorbent it is, I think it'll dry faster than glossy cardstock. Alright, now the scene's taking a little bit of time here too, because it is a half-page scene, but I wanted to do this test on a large enough size that would, where I would have coverage, okay? Now now going back to things like coloring on here, this is going to take me a little bit of time to get used to because of just how absorbent the surface is and fast drying it is, okay? How fast drying it is as a result of that absorbency. But I don't think it'll take too long. I think the scene came out okay. But for me, I think that that sponge really helped. Having something absorbent, okay, that absorbs liquid, and by the, and it can also be squeezed out. That's the nature of a sponge. That's what's good about an absorbent type of applicator, okay? The paper towel is really designed to soak in, but, if you squeeze it out, it just doesn't necessarily come out of there. But a sponge, if you take up a lot of, liquid in there, it would, squeeze out probably a little bit easier. But let's take a look at this Versafine ink right here. See how this Versafine is really dark? It's quite a bit darker than that black impression back there. Those black impressions of the Lakeside Cove are pretty dark, and if it weren't for these ones down here, that would look like 100% black. But now they're lighter by relation. They look more like a 95% gray or something like that, I think. Okay, this is my oak branch. Let's say we have some kind of object with an overhanging branch, kind of fills out your overhead composition. It kind of closes off the composition really nicely. Having kind of an overhang like this, it kind of frames things off. You don't always have to do it, but I think it looks pretty good. All right. Now, I was thinking about applying some of my Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white on here, and I think I will. Although the scene here became a little bit longer than what I was thinking of. I started getting really into the scenes. Like, I completely forgot about, talking about the surface and paper aspect of this, when I started doing it. After I started getting into it, because I think it looks really, the scene's looking pretty good. So, I know you get lost in, your work here. I'm a bad instructor from that point of, aspect of things. I start rambling on about different things. Okay, this is the pine, leafless pine. Just having some variation in there. When you get out in nature too, there's dead pines out there. It gives you a sense of kind of age and whatnot, and weather and whatnot like that. Having that in there. See those two like that? Doesn't that add quite a bit to it? All right, let's see. Okay. Moving on, let's try my other typical processes. Here is some white pigment ink, okay? On a cotton ball, your common everyday applicator or household item used as an applicator. Okay, let's see. Where light meets dark, okay? So here's a lot of light here. So let's soften the transition here between some of that light area. If I want to do something really dramatic, you add those light beams in there with a couple of pieces of paper coming across in here. I don't think I'm going to do that, though. Could. Yeah, I think it would look better. But I was thinking, okay, put the brakes on that one. We're talking about paper here, so. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I really like this pigment ink on, I love it on everything. I'm always using it on glossy, but as I've mentioned in some other videos, like having it on just like a plain matte paper, this pigment ink really does kind of harmonize with a matte paper more, because this pigment ink dries in a matte finish, okay? So sometimes it, it creates a matte finish on a glossy cardstock, but on this one it just feels like it's more kind of integral, in terms of a light or texture. Okay, so see that right there? I've put that over my trees, and look out, pushed it into the background. And this looks really good. I mean, it just looks really natural. All right? Look at that glossiness on the ink, but on the paper, you see that paper? The paper, no, if it was on glossy cardstock, it would just shine all the way across. So I don't know, who knows? Maybe this creates a little bit more depth. Maybe having, the paper not as glossy. There's a certain type of impact, though, that glossy paper has in terms of the overall effect, but I think this has its own kind of, something not glossy. It has its own kind of spirit to it. Maybe there's more of a textural range, Everything's just not all glossy, There's matte and glossy, areas in here. The glossiness was in here. In this case, it seems to be provided by the Versafine black. Now, it's shiny like that because the Versafine is still wet, but even when it dries, I think it'll influence it. See, even the dye-based ink has that own type of sheen to it. Okay, so that being said, I think when I spray this type of paper right here, I'm going to do it with a spray fixative more than, say, the glossy Krylon spray. If I Krylon glossy spray, it'll just make it all glossy, and that's fine too. But I tend to like this contrast here, this textural contrast that we have, that exists, just naturally. So when I spray seal it, I'm looking to retain that. Okay, this is a little kayaker here. I just happen to have this out. I think I used it in a previous recent video. I'll have it down here like so. Okay. Kind of gives a little peekaboo type of focal point to the scene. And let's just go for texture in here. Okay. Let's go with the Dr. Martens Bleed-Proof White. This is going to look quite dramatic, and I'm doing this because it is so hot right now. Here, where I am. So, you can stamp your winter types of imagery. Who knows? Maybe it's more, kind of cool to stamp it out in summertime if you're really hot. That being said, when you're in the depths of winter, or it's a late winter, and it's getting around, February, March, and you're still real cold, and wherever you are in the country, then why don't you stamp this and do it in a warm sunset or something like that, or tropical. Okay, so Dr. Martens on the toothbrush here. I'll show you. See that splatter painting type of thing? I'm not putting a huge amount on there at any given time. It's like the first snow or something, maybe. Who knows? Maybe that's what that represents. I just really like it as a texture. See that right there? Isn't that kind of fun, though? I mean, who knows? I mean, it's not, maybe something, a logical type of addition to this scene right here. This scene doesn't necessarily look winter to me, but I don't know, just from a textural standpoint, or a textural statement, it really adds kind of a nice, I don't know, kind of a finishing touch or whatever. I don't know if it's a finishing touch. It's more kind of a extreme to that. But see these areas out here. So this area in here, I didn't think, in the background looks terribly interesting, but when you put these little specks down like that, it almost looks really busy when you look it up like that. But this is if you were staring at something like from 2 inches away. This is how this scene looks, at arm's distance, so it's not so, kind of extreme. And, okay, so we have all that. No big surprises here in terms of this paper. One thing that was a little bit of a surprise, I didn't expect the paper to be quite so absorbent when applying the inks, okay? So if you've done this type of you know, ink layering before. I'm not talking about just in terms of the circles, but I'm just talking about layering dye-based inks over the, you know, if you followed some of these lessons before. The thing that I think you'll need to do, and me too, is whatever amount of this, your first color that you lay down on glossy cardstock, go about, I don't know if I'd go twice as much, maybe. At least 50% more, because the paper, I'm using the white paint pen here to add some highlights on tops of those rocks. The paper is just going to keep absorbing that first layer that you lay down there. So if you want to, if that first layer is going to be something that you're benefiting from in terms of layering the additional colors on top of in a really smooth fashion, then add more of that base layer down there so that your base layer doesn't dry up so fast. Because it's kind of hard to, what I'm talking about is it's, when you're when you're applying these darker colors on, and if the paper is real dry, you know, it's a clunkier process. It's a little bit easier if the paper is kind of moist, right? Your surface is a little bit more moist. So you can kind of slide and glide and, you know, blend your other colors on there easier. Okay, so see this right on, just some highlights on the tops of some of these rocks. I have to be careful with this Versafine. Like I said, it's still a little bit wet. Let's see on the top sides of these rocks. Now see, these rocks out here are in the shadows, so I don't put as many highlights onto them. Alright, let's see. Let me adjust this exposure of this camera. Okay, my exposure was a little bit off. I was working on a white piece of paper, so I have to kind of overexpose a little bit, but then this is real dark now, so I think that's probably a little bit closer to what the original looks like here in front of me. Okay, let's see these little highlights. This pen's clogging up on me a little bit. It could be that it's just so dry and hot out right now. But as I go over some of that Dr. Martens too, then maybe I'm picking up some of that Dr. Martens on the tip here and it's clogging it up. The Dr. Martens really dries fast. Okay. Maybe it'd been better if I did this first before the Dr. Martens. The Dr. Martens is almost like having this chalk, little spots of dried chalk on this surface. Okay, but anyway, new paper, new potential here, tweaks to potential, and I don't know, I think that Versafine is drying faster, like I mentioned. It's still damp to the touch, I think. Look at my fingers right here. This is the difference between working with a stylus tool and working with a sponge, though. Sponge and paper towel, okay? My fingers usually don't get like this crazy. But that, you know, that will, what, you know, drive out of, let me see if I have it clean here. My pinky's clean here. Okay, yeah, that's still really wet there. See my finger right there? It's all black. Okay, so I just touched that black area right there. Look at this, see? So that will, you know, that'll take us some time to dry. I thought it was maybe setting up a little bit faster, but there's no doubt in my mind that that will dry, though. With my glossy cardstock, sometimes I have to let it dry for 24 hours, but I have a feeling that with this one it might be, I don't know, maybe an hour or two or something like that. I don't know, though, for sure until that, you know, it happens. But like I said, this is going to be a little bit more absorbent, or a lot more absorbent. So having this kind of floating, kind of oil-based impression on there, having the paper more absorbent, it's going to absorb that oil faster than a coated glossy cardstock. You know, it has that extra seal of that gloss on there in terms of the amount of gloss, I guess. This one has a little bit of it, but, you know, not too much. So, okay, so anyway, first test with this one. I was looking forward to using it, but I've been playing around with the plain, you know, staples uncoated cardstock, and whenever I start playing around with kind of some new stuff, I get kind of addicted to it, and I just want to keep playing around and experimenting with it. Plus, when you're learning something new that's kind of its own addiction, you just you get kind of addicted to I don't know, just seeing what you can do and exploring and whatnot. So anyway, another thing is too, this this paper right here, what I really love about it too, this added thing is that, like I said, it usually, my papers usually start curling like this, where I have to kind of counter bend all the time. But this one is really pretty flat still, so, really quite nice in terms of that aspect of it. And it's not thicker than, the paper that I'm usually working with in terms of my glossy cardstock at 10 point. This is kind of real similar to the 10 point in the 100-pound weight. I don't know what that is equivalent in terms of point, but really similar, but yeah, really flat. I don't know, maybe because this one's absorbent, I don't know, maybe it's getting pulled into the pulp as opposed to kind of drying on the surface and curling. I don't know, I have no idea. Okay, so if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. If you've played around with this paper before, if you have some kind of satin or, dull finish like this, let me know. And then if you also, one of the things that would be really awesome is if you're somewhere international and you have a really good paper source that you order from or whatnot, for your different cardstocks and coated cardstocks and kind of a little bit more obscure types of papers, if you can put it down in the comments section, like I'm in Australia and I get my paper from here, that would be really awesome and a really great resource for the other viewers of the videos, okay? So anyways, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And let's see, again, the Mohawk white coated silk 100-pound weight, and it'll always be in the notation section, description section underneath all of these videos.